Which dead celebrities are treated like saints, but were truly awful people when they were alive? Ray Charles. Made children all over the place and refused to acknowledge them. Jerry Lewis. He treated his family like shit, cut his kids out of his will and was a real boss on set. Watch some clips on YouTube of him and his behavior. Terrible. Most likely stemming from when he and Dean Martin split from being Martin and Lewis. Everyone thought Dean would disappear and Jerry would go on to be a massive star. As it turned out, it was the complete reverse. He was a bitter, bitter person. Frank Lloyd Wright. He is seen as a visionary in architecture, but he was a horrible person IRL. Raging narcissist, abandoned his wife and kids to run off with the wife of one of his clients, nailed down his selected furniture in a client's home because he didn't like what the client wanted, etc. It's probably come up time and again, but John Lennon was not a nice man. His son grew to despise him enough to tell Paul McCartney that he wished Paul was his father. Bing Crosby. Father of the century. Physically and mentally abusive to all his kids, alcoholic, adulterer, slimy businessman. Check it out. I haven't seen Michael Landon's name come up yet. He did amazing on Little House on the Prairie, but apparently he was actually a raging alcoholic and even his own kids made a documentary about the father I knew. I feel like Cosby is as good as dead and would have been beatified if he had died before he got caught. Coco Chanel, revered fashion icon and also Nazi sympathizer. My mother, who was a young adult during Bing Crosby's peak, said that he was a horrible husband and father. A serial philanderer and violent. Bing Crosby. Years ago, while watching Blue Skies with him and Fred Astaire, my dad gushed over Astaire's legacy. I asked what Bing was like and he said, besides beating his wife and kids. What a voice. Can't watch anything with him in it now. He was a monster to anyone close to him. Alfred Hitchcock was really, really terrible. Johnny Carson. He cheated on his wives and was an all-around prick when he wasn't on camera. The most widely known example was him telling Joan Rivers that she'd never become the star of The Tonight Show. She was the permanent guest host at the time, then refusing to ever speak to her again after she got a job elsewhere. Jimmy Savile. Until after he died and everything came out about the bad stuff he did. Big pun. His kids and widow fucking hated him. He pistol whipped his wife in front of his children and broke her face. By some Stones fans, Brian Jones. He deserves to be honored for his role in the band, and for his musical contributions, and it's a shame how his life ended, but he also had a history of domestic violence. Pablo Picasso. James Brown. Yikes. Reading all these things. Is there anyone who wasn't the worst? Alfred Hitchcock. P.T. Barnum. All cause of The Greatest Showman. Skeptical smiley face. Didn't U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy once kill his assistant while driving? Frank Sinatra. My grandpa's girlfriend and her husband used to work for him, and he was a right bastard. Didn't think that he had to pay people that worked for him, treated employees bad, all the usual human stuff. Edit. My grandpa was a widower and his girlfriend was a widow. Since no one mentioned them yet. Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. In her letters, de Beauvoir mentions several romantic and sexual relationships with female students of hers. In one case she met a 17-year-old student who she had a relationship, and later introduced her to Sartre, who also began to have sex with her. There were a few others who basically made up Sartre's personal harem, while de Beauvoir acted as the pimp, seducing teenage girls into threesomes with Sartre. Additionally, Beau-Th were signatories of a petition to remove the age of consent laws in France. The petition was written by a known pedo, Gabriel Matzneff, and signed by other French intellectuals including Foucault, who himself has been accused of sodomizing boys. Pablo Picasso was an abusive, raging narcissist who sucked the life out of people around him. His muses were generally young women he'd domineer and destroy. Frank Lloyd Wright abandoned his wife and children to take a mistress, who was herself already married. He drove his butler insane, and the guy ended up killing Wright's mistress and her kids, burned down his studio, and committed suicide by drinking acid. Wright wasn't there at the time. Wright's response to this was to rebuild the studio exactly as it was before, supposedly, to honor his mistress and their children, but it was pretty obvious to people at the time that he just wanted to court his legacy as an architect, as many of his most famous innovations were showcased in the design. Sure enough, it became the museum to his work and is still visited today. How soon until Woody Allen dies? Can we just include people who are really old and long past their sell-by date? Lou Reed. I love the Velvet Underground, but many of the band members were awful. I've worked for Prince and it's a not so hidden secret he was absolutely awful to work with. There used to be a saying, you're nobody in this industry until you've been fired by Prince. He's a legend for sure but was awful to those who put the show on, and his ego was out of control. And when it came down to it, he died from an OD. So for someone who was so quick to fire anyone over a simple mistake and he's so critical of weakness, it turns out he had some hidden weaknesses of his own. Also, from all accounts Jim Morrison was an awful person. Kandinsky fled Germany and let his artist girlfriend stay and hid his and other greats' art so they couldn't be found and destroyed by the Nazis. She was an artist herself and was in danger, as well as would have been killed if the artworks she was hiding were found. He hid in Denmark and instead of returning to her he had forgotten he had a girlfriend, who risked her life, and got married to someone else. To make things worse, he decided to steal his ex's style of abstract painting and this is where his work started to get recognition. Edit. Wow. Did T think this would get so much interest? It was Gabrielle Munter he left. My source is an academic and gallery director who worked in the gallery I also worked in, mainly Impressionists, Courtauld. Salvador Dali was a fascist that beat women. Patton and MacArthur were pretty shit people too. Paul Allen. Anyone that has a not allowed to look at me policy in place for his own arena staff is kind of a dick. Edit. Didn't expect this to blow up at all. Alexander Hamilton. Kirk Douglas. It's an open secret in Hollywood that he raped Natalie Wood. About 60% of them all. Most people don't get to the top by being nice, but there are exceptions. Wow, I have learned so much from this comment section. Jimmy Savile. Absolute monster. His celebrity as an English radio and TV personality gained him unrestricted access to hospitals with disabled children whom he abused. That's putting his life very lightly. Beware if you go on to read more about him. He's not dead, but didn't George Lopez cheat on his wife that gave him a kidney by hooking up with some prostitutes? Thomas Edison. Literally one of the biggest pieces of shit. Stole patents. Stomped out competitors with physical force and violence. Electrocuted an elephant to mislead the public his inferior power grid was less dangerous than Nikola Tesla's, and a lot more. Sonny Bono. Massive prick before he passed. Used to hang out and play Sega at his house with his kid. Here's a few in song form. The Chaser. Eulogy song. https://youtube.be/ftxconlig. Elvis. He was with Priscilla when she was 15. I think it's probably safe to assume they were having sex. Probably XXXTentacion. Dr. Seuss had an affair for years while his wife battled cancer. Drove her to suicide. Married the woman he'd been having the affair with a couple months later. Thomas fucking Edison. XXXTentacion was a piece of shit. Maradona. I love my football but goodness he was a terrible person. Steve Jobs was an asshole to his family, his own kids hated him, his wife only stayed for the money. He also was known for throwing work colleagues under the bus to cover his own ass, and taking credit for things he didn't invent. Edit. Thanks to everyone for the awards, wasn't expecting this to blow up like it did. Thank you all. Wasn't John Lennon an abusive husband? Edit. This thread is a fucking rollercoaster of emotions. I hate saying it because outside of this incident he actually seemed like a good guy. But on 2 occasions, Paul Walker dated 16-year-old girls. Once when he was 28, and again when he was 32. This was all while he had a young daughter of his own. The age of consent in California is 18, meaning if he did anything sexual with them, he could have been charged and indicted on statutory rape. I guess being a predator is okay, though, if you're really good looking.